A while ago, my friend Amy Knott Parrish and I were talking about recording this podcast episode that you're listening to right now. And we thought it would be interesting to talk about Amy's decision to be sober and how when someone makes that decision, other people in their lives don't always seem very comfortable with it. We thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about other situations in life where people make an unusual or unexpected decision. Maybe you have a really comfortable, stable, well-paying job and you decide to quit and start your own business. Or maybe you decide to leave a relationship that you no longer find satisfying. This type of change or transition can be particularly challenging if we feel like other people in our lives don't understand or don't approve of what we're doing. Amy and I did end up talking about all of this, but Amy also had some really amazing thoughts to share about how these topics relate to the connections that we create with other people in our lives. She had some beautiful things to say about how we can create genuine, authentic, meaningful connections with other people. And I hope you'll enjoy hearing what Amy has to say as much as I did. This is Task, Time, Energy, the Purpose-Filled Productivity Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Miller. Welcome to the show. Welcome, everyone. Our guest today, once again, is Amy Knott Parrish. Amy was a guest back in June, and we recorded a really cool episode called The Journey and the Destination. If you haven't heard that yet, I would say check it out. I'm super excited to have you back, Amy. I'm super excited to have you here again.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here.
We have all these awesome conversations with different people. And I've said a few times that, I'd like to have somebody back. I'd like to have you back. And I think so far, Lauren is the only one. My wife, Lauren, is the only person besides me who's been on multiple episodes. I am really excited about having some people back for a second episode. And you're launching it, Amy. You're the one making it happen. Amy, you are a personal development coach. How long have you been coaching, Amy?
I'm in my 6th year.
And in addition to your own practice, you've also worked for a couple of different companies that provide coaching. You are a graduate of IPEC, the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. That's how we met. I was going through an IPEC training course, and you were one of the assistant teachers in that course. You are a professional certified coach, PCC, accredited by the International Coaching Federation. Any other recent accomplishments? Any other cool things you've been doing, Amy, that you want to talk about?
Oh, wow. It's interesting. I've been kind of pushing the envelope a little bit and making myself get out of my introvert/extrovert comfort zone and joined an improv class that I'm excited to be part of with you and a couple of other friends. So I'm feeling very proud of that. Just trying some new things.
Yeah, that is super fun. Just to share the story with our listeners, you and I and a couple of other coaches that that I know now too, we all met for coffee and we were just hanging out and just started talking about taking an improv class. And somebody was like, yeah, let's do it. And just emailed an hour later saying, hey, I've signed up for one. Let's do it. Okay. And next thing we knew, we were all signed up for this improv class and that we were in greatly enjoying. Super fun thing.
Yeah. Big personal challenge. Big. It's a really hard thing for me to do, to be up in front of people doing stuff.
Yeah. Is it? What
Yeah.
What makes that challenging for you?
I think the hardest part for me is that I don't have time to sort of intellectualize it and figure it out. You have to go with it. And so it's really not only helping me personally to be able to not overthink things so much, but also professionally too, to be able to really be with clients in the moment and go with what my gut is telling me versus trying to figure out the right thing to say.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. That's kind of the value of it, I think, is helping us in those times when we really just want to be in the moment and go with what's happening in the moment and not overthink. And We were talking a little bit about recording this episode, about recording another episode together. And you were talking about your experiences in life with alcohol. You talked about this a little bit in the last episode that we recorded, but it would be interesting to hear what you want to share about that and some of the things you've been thinking about that, and some of the ideas that came up when we were talking about this before. Do you want to share that with people, Amy?
Yeah. It's, I've been sober for a little over 10 years now. At the beginning, one of the first things that I did was go to a Christmas party with all you can drink booze everywhere. And so needless to say, I had a bottle of Pellegrino in my hand the whole time. I stayed away from the bar. I was mostly down with the kids. So nobody really questioned me because I really didn't give them an opportunity to do so. But it is interesting, when you don't drink, people really don't understand why you are going against what is such a normal thing to do. Oh, you don't drink? How do you go to weddings? Oh, you don't drink? How do you celebrate your birthday? Oh, you don't drink? What are you going to do when your kids get married? It's such a deep part of our social lives to have alcohol as another person at the party. And to leave that person out, right, feels unnatural for some people.
That's a really interesting way to describe it, as another person at the party. I don't know if I've ever heard it described that way.
I haven't said it that way.
Do you want to share a little bit more about your story, about how you came to that decision to be sober?
So I started drinking when I was 14 years old. I had a pretty rough childhood. My parents both had hard childhoods and didn't really get a lot of help for that. And so that led into them not really being able to take care of me very well. And so I started drinking at 14 as kind of a way to ease the pain of feeling like I didn't really belong anywhere. There wasn't a safe place for me. The first time I drank, I got blackout drunk on Sun Country wine coolers, 2-liter. And from there, it just took off. I figured out quickly that if I drank enough, I would forget. I would forget who I was. None of my pain would matter. And so that's what I did. So I was a blackout drinker for 27 years. I didn't drink during the day. I didn't drink every day. But when I did, I drank so much that I could not remember what had happened. I was still very high functioning. That was something that has been a strange thing to deal with, that people really didn't understand how bad it was because I was so good at acting like everything was fine. And then finally, when I was 41 years old, I quit. I just woke up. I was desperately hungover. My kids were 7 and 4 at the time, and I couldn't get out of bed to make them breakfast. And I could see myself in 20 years with no kids near me, with nobody around me, because I had ruined all of my relationships because of alcohol. And so I quit that day. It wasn't the first time that I had decided that I was going to quit, but it was the last time.
When you talk about not drinking every day, not drinking all the time, not drinking during the day, but when you drank and got blackout drunk. I remember talking to a friend, this is a few years ago, but she said something very similar. She said, I never really thought I had a problem with alcohol. I would just go home and drink to help me fall asleep. And then I realized that what I was actually doing was drinking until I blacked out. And that's when she made the decision, like, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. I wonder how much or how common that is for somebody to make that shift in just how you're looking at it and go from that place where you're saying, oh, this is no big deal, to, oh, wait a minute, maybe this is a big deal, and how much of a role that plays in people making the decision to be sober.
I think for some people it probably does. It's interesting because I had 3 out of 4 of my grandparents were very severe alcoholics. I grew up with the stories of what it was like to grow up with alcoholics. And so I knew, even at 14, if I do this, this is going to be a problem for me. Mm. And so for me, I always knew I was playing with fire. I always knew that if I did this, it was dangerous and it wasn't going to end well for me. I went to my first AA meeting. I think I was 22 years old because I knew, but I also didn't want to know. And I think maybe that's the common thread that runs through with most people is there's stuff that that you just don't want to know. And you can live for decades like that.
Yep. That is some of the toughest things for us to confront are the things that we know, and yet we don't want to admit that we know it until for some reason it's, now it's in your face and you can't avoid it. Yeah, that makes sense. Talking about making the decision to be sober now in social situations. For you, Amy, how much did you feel like you actually had awkwardness coming from other people, or was it like you feeling a little awkward on their behalf that you weren't drinking? Does that make sense?
It does. For me, the decision to quit just made so much sense that I just didn't question it. I had questioned it before when I had tried to stop, but this time I just knew like, this is absolutely the right decision. And so for me, it was definitely more about other people's discomfort and then my discomfort because they were uncomfortable. My own discomfort didn't come from the fact that I felt uncomfortable and I really wanted a drink. It came from the fact that the person or people with me were uncomfortable with me not drinking. And because they were uncomfortable with me not drinking, I was uncomfortable because I was making them uncomfortable. It's a totally different thing than the argument with yourself that I imagine some people have where, oh gosh, I can't do this. I don't want to let myself down. That was not the internal dialogue. It was more about like, oh, I can't believe I'm letting you down, that I'm not willing to drink. But it was more like also disbelief, I guess, at that time. What? You not drinking? Because drinking was such a big part of my identity. That's who I was. I was the person who knew some stuff about wine. I could really drink a lot, and I was always willing to. Being a drinker as part of my identity was a huge way that people knew me. And it was something that eventually most of the relationships that I had at the time that I quit don't exist anymore.
I imagine that's a concern for some people, and that might make some people hesitate to make changes in their life. I don't know how many people are like thinking about it this way or aware of it, but if I stop doing this, I'm not going to have anything in common with my friends, or that's the thing that we always do for fun. So what's going to happen to my friends? What's going to happen to those relationships? What are your thoughts now looking back at that and saying, hey, I don't have these relationships anymore?
I mean, I'm pretty happy about it. The people that I was with are all wonderful people. They are amazing people. But when I built relationships on the thing that we did, the thing that bound us together was that we drank together, which once you take alcohol out of that equation, it fell apart because we didn't know each other at all. And so when you are buzzed or drunk with people, you feel so close. But if you can't feel that way without the alcohol, then it might be time to see if that relationship works without the substance as your binder. I think one of the reasons that my marriage didn't last, that we separated and aren't together anymore, is because we didn't drink together anymore. The way we got together is we drank together.
When you talk about relationships changing because there's this thing that you do together, and then when you no longer do that thing together, you kind of feel like there's not as much basis for a relationship. I think that happens anyway in life. It really does, like I can think of people I've been really close to in the past. I mean, there are some people that I've been close to in the past that I'm just going to always be close to. People I've known for 20 or 30 years, and I could call them up tomorrow and it's like we just talked to each other yesterday, and there's always going to be a connection there. But yeah, with some people, the example I'm thinking of is like maybe if you're married or you're in a relationship, there are other couples that you're friends with and hang out with. And then maybe some of those couples start having children. And all of a sudden, they have to spend a lot of time doing things with their kids and for their kids. And then they're spending time with other parents who are also doing things with their kids and for their kids. And there tends to often be a divide between the couples who have children and the couples who don't. And that's just something that happens. And as much as you can say, well, it's kind of a bummer that I don't spend time with those people anymore, it is kind of a natural thing that's going to happen in life, whether we want it to or not. And so to say, I'm afraid to stop doing this thing that's maybe not very good for me because I'm worried of the impact it will have on my relationships, it's going to happen anyway in life. Another thing that you said that I think is very, very wise, if alcohol is the basis for your relationship, and that's what's binding you with those people, maybe it's a good idea to spend some time away from that and practice building relationships and making connections with people that aren't based on that.
It's almost like speaks to a bigger societal ill, which is that we have to be the same to be able to be in community with one another. That we naturally sort of close out even close relationships because I don't drink anymore, or someone has kids and we don't have kids. To create that delineation also cheats us out of a full experience. I can hang out with people who are drinking and it doesn't bother me. Now, if everybody starts getting loaded, I'm going to leave because I don't like it. I don't like to see people I care about move into being different than I know them because they've had more to drink. That's just my own personal preference. Or maybe if you don't have kids and the kids are acting up and it's just really frustrating and loud, maybe you're just like, hey, this has been great, but I got to go. And if it doesn't have to be all or nothing, like if we don't have to be only with the people who are like us, how can we challenge ourselves to make deeper connection, not based on a substance or status, but just who we are as people?
It seems natural for us as human beings to make connection with people who are similar to us. For whatever reason, right? That seems to be the way our brains work, the way our emotions work. It's easier to feel connected to people when we feel like they're similar to us. And yet there are so many great opportunities there to connect with people who are different, maybe on the surface. And maybe we discover that a lot of the differences that we see are superficial, or we just say, hey, yeah, this person is a certain way, and that's different from the way I see the world, or that's different from the way I spend my time. But we can still have good conversations together and, learn from each other and enjoy each other's company. I think we do tend to overlook opportunities to do that.
Yeah. What I found is that because I don't drink, social situations can be really awkward. And instead of feeling like that awkwardness or that bit of being uncomfortable is a bad thing, I understand that it's just part of getting to know someone. And so to me, alcohol cheats us out of that experience of not knowing and having to learn about another person and feel awkward and kind of, oh, I don't have anything to say, or we're just sitting here looking at each other. It's really awkward. Those moments are what can bring you closer because you've gone through something a little difficult together.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. I was thinking like those awkward moments are what inspire us or motivate us to learn how to talk to people, right? How to start a conversation, whether that's spontaneous or whether we say, I'd like to be better at just starting conversations with people. And when we're doing that without any kind of like external chemical assistance, yeah, it's a little more natural, forces us a little more to get out of our comfort zones and do that.
It makes me think about getting out of your comfort zone in that situation, or like if I'm the person with kids and you and your wife come over and the kids are just being complete maniacs and it's really loud and no one's behaving, I'm going to feel embarrassed. But maybe I don't have to. Maybe if we can have these awkward moments together of, oh, wow, the kids are just totally blowing our get together. We'll see you guys next weekend. We'll try again. It gives everybody the opportunity that everything doesn't go smoothly all the time, and that we can have some grace and mercy for one another in these moments of awkwardness or discomfort.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes the question is like, who's actually uncomfortable here? If we really start talking about it, the parents are like, oh, I'm so sorry. My kids are being so noisy and running around. And we're like, well, they're not breaking anything. Like they're just playing. It's totally fine with us. And the parents are like, really? You don't mind? I'm like, no, we don't mind. We thought you were uncomfortable because your kids are behaving that way. No, we're fine. They're not breaking anything. And everybody's actually okay with the situation. It's just the belief or the assumption that the other people are uncomfortable. And so we're supposed to be uncomfortable. And they're thinking the same thing.
Yes. If we take away the idea that we have to normalize everything being so smooth and easy, and that we can actually connect over, wow, the kids are being such jerks, or I feel totally awkward right now and I just really don't know what else to say, but I do still want to keep hanging out with you. What does that vulnerability do to our connections?
Yeah. Vulnerability is one of the ways that we connect in a genuine way, right?
Right. And for me, alcohol erased me. Amy, wasn't there anymore because I was under the influence. And so I wasn't authentic. I was just a person whose inhibitions had been lessened because I was taking a chemical.
Yeah. And mistaking that lowering of inhibitions for the ability to actually, communicate and connect.
Yeah. I'm successfully socializing because I don't feel awkward anymore.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting, reminds me of, what Brene Brown talks about in there's that one TED talk that she did that's really amazing. A lot of people have seen The Power of Vulnerability. But she talks about this idea that when we try to erase the things that we don't like, when we try to numb the things that we don't like, we're numbing all the positive things too, all the things that we actually like and enjoy. It's not as selective as we would like it to be. When we were talking about doing this, or initially, you came up with the idea of calling this episode Against the Grain. And there are a few different meanings there, a little bit of a pun there. But something interesting that we were talking about a little bit is other situations in life where we're not going along with what everybody else is doing. We're kind of forging our own path. And there's a little bit of awkwardness in that, or maybe sometimes a lot. There's some discomfort. And some of that comes from how going off in our own direction or doing things our own way impacts our relationships with other people or how we interact with other people. I'm just wondering about any other situations that you can think of that are similar in that way.
I mean, for me, I waited tables for most of my adult life. And so, I dropped out of college, before I was kicked out because my GPA was so low. I wasn't in any position to be going to college. When I went purely to get out of the house. And so many times people would meet me and talk to me and then, oh, what do you do? Oh, I wait tables. Oh. And in my 20s, it was definitely like, I didn't have any goals. I just needed to pay my rent. But then after I got married and had kids, it was kind of a great thing because my husband could work in the day and I could work at night. And it gave us both the opportunity to stay with the kids and to not have to do daycare. And so doing something unconventional as a career that I made great money at, it just wasn't a real job, as many people said to me. Oh, well, what's your real job?
Oh, really?
This is my real job. This is what I really do. It's how I really make money. And so I haven't really had a typical career path. So that's another way that I have sort of gone against the grain, is kind of not stepping into a typical career, even though at times I really, really wanted to. I really wanted the safety of, yeah, I work at Duke. This is what I do there. This is my safety net. It's all around me. And all I have to say is that, and then I'm okay. I'm acceptable. You have a job we understand. Being a life coach, same thing. You're a what? Now there's a lot more understanding around it. But back in 2016, when I did my training, people didn't know what a life coach was. So my whole life has been just sort of being a pioneer, plotting my own way, not really on purpose, but on purpose.
Yeah, it's interesting, when you really start analyzing some of those things, like you were talking about, working at Duke, and there's a safety net there because that makes you acceptable. When really, if you were really to analyze it from an objective view, if you wait tables, some people really like that work, right? People can be jerks, customers can be jerks, and it can be, a lot of time on your feet and fast paced and everything. But some people think it's a great environment. They like that kind of work. And it can be a great way to make money, right? I remember talking to somebody who I believe was waiting tables at the same restaurant that you were working at. And he just happened to mention how much he made a year. And it was interesting because it was just a little bit more than someone I knew who was working as the director of a nonprofit. So here's someone who's doing that, quote, great work. And yet, if you think, all right, well, I'm working to make money, somebody waiting tables can be making a really good living. And if that's your goal, is to say, yeah, I want to make a living and I want to do something that I don't hate. And waiting tables can be kind of fun. And I like talking to people and, it's all good. Like, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with having that as your career, as, your calling in life, right? Does any of that make sense?
It makes total sense because it makes me think about what we've been talking about, which is drinking. What's wrong with not drinking? What's wrong with not doing the thing that everybody else is doing? Or the thing that's considered normal or the best way to succeed? Once you start thinking about your life as a series of instructions that are yours to be done by you, when you get out of what should be happening or what's okay for everybody, and you lean into what's actually yours, then things like not drinking become your normal. Or waiting tables becomes normal, acceptable, whatever thing you want to put on it to make it palatable. I don't know that I want to say that word. I think a lot of times when we choose safety, we leave ourselves out. And so we have these societal benchmarks that define who we are. But really, am I defined by the fact that I wait tables for a living? Is that how you're going to judge who I am in the world? Am I going to judge someone because they have wine with dinner?
Yeah, it makes me think of a very natural tendency our brain has to want things to be simple. We want everything to fit neatly into little boxes that we understand. This makes sense to me, so I understand it, so I'm in control of the situation. And I think a lot of some of the judgments that we quickly arrive at about people or about ourselves just work that way. How many of these judgments are just our brains trying to find a simple way to make sense of the world? Right. So, okay, you do that for a living and that means this and that means that. Oh, you drink wine or you drink it all. And so that means this or that means that. You don't drink, that means this, that means that. Rather than being comfortable with not knowing, being comfortable with just like, yeah, this doesn't mean anything yet. I don't really know. I don't really know what kind of person this is. I just met them,
Right. I mean, there's so many layers in there, Scott, because like, not knowing or being uncomfortable is really hard for people. And the sense of curiosity, if you are alive and you're living and you're curious instead of knowing, it's like Zen mind, beginner's mind. Have you ever read that?
I don't think I have. I know,
Okay.
the book you're talking about. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, but I haven't read it.
It's an amazing book, but basically one of the things it says is experts only know one thing. Beginners can know many things, which I just think is so kind of speaks to what you're being curious about right now. How do you not have all of these predictive autopilot behaviors, but actually lean into like living your life?
I think we can take that even one step further. You're saying beginners know many things, experts only know one thing. There's a different stage of expertise. When you get somebody who's really an expert, has really mastered something, I think there's an aspect of that where you become aware of how much you don't know and you're okay with it, right?
Yes.
So maybe there's something there about being the masters of our lives is knowing that there's so much that we don't know and being okay with that.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
Just being in situations and going against the grain just reminded me of, I was in a situation where I'd left this one career that I had been involved in for a long time and hadn't decided yet what I was going to do next. So, there were a couple of months where I just wasn't working and really wasn't sure what I wanted to do next. And, when I would meet someone new, they would say, "Oh, what do you do?" And I would always talk about what I used to do, or, well, this is what I'm thinking about doing next. It was always the past or the future is what I would talk about when somebody asked me what I do. And I remember I was at this event and just started talking to somebody and they asked me, "What do you do?" And I just paused for a second and I looked at them. I said, "Nothing." And they didn't know how to respond to that. I just said nothing and looked at them. And I started doing that, in the weeks following. Met some people, and every once in a while I'd meet someone and they'd say, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'd say nothing. And people did not know how to respond to that. I remember that situation being the one where I felt like people were really uncomfortable and didn't know how to act. Like me not drinking was not as big of a deal, but this was a really big deal to say like, yeah, I'm not doing anything right now. People would ask me if I was retired. "Are you retired?" One person like immediately said, "Oh, are you rich?" Well, that's kind of an interesting question to ask someone you've known for 3 minutes.
Right.
That I think there are situations where when you're going against the grain, when you've decided to do something that is meaningful for you or feels genuine or authentic or just the way that you want to live your own life, very often people aren't used to that or aren't sure how to respond. There's whatever the reason for it. I mean, we could spend all day trying to dive into the psychology of it, but whatever reason, people aren't sure how to respond. Sometimes it's helpful to just recognize that awkwardness is there and just live in it and have it be okay.
Yeah. And to be able to, if you are doing something that's against the grain, to be able to usher that in. So if somebody's asking you a question and you're doing something maybe that is not a typical thing, and they're kind of taken aback and the moment is awkward, can you help them hold that? And maybe that would give them the courage to be able to do that as well.
That's interesting. What do you mean by help them hold that?
For example, with the story that you just told about, oh, what do you do? Actually, nothing. And then for people to be taken aback, maybe to take a little more ownership of it and be like, yeah, I know, I can see by the look on your face that you're curious. Do you have any questions for me about that?
Yeah, encourage people to ask whatever questions are on their mind that they're not sure whether they should ask or not.
Yes, because then you're not hiding.
Yeah.
Like you're kind of against the grain, but only a little against it. But really being able to stand up and say, here is where I'm against the grain. And I also can talk about it and I can tell you about it. Because maybe there's a place you want to go against the grain too.
Yeah. Normalizing abnormality, right? But there's such a great idea there of being okay with it and being okay with people's curiosity, uncertainty, and making that okay. And I believe that is, I very much believe in what you're saying, that the more that we're willing to do that, the more we help other people see that it's okay to do it.
And to step out of the idea that somebody who waits tables is a lesser quality person because of the job that they have. You just begin to give validity for people's humanity. If work is part of your life, but it's only part, it's not your whole life. And so if your identity isn't wrapped in what you do for a living, but what you do for a living is a piece of who you are, how does that change things? How do you fill out the rest? Because you have so many more parts of your life that can be lived.
That's an important observation, I think, because if we have that tendency to judge other people because of the job they do, or judge ourselves, like, oh, I'm, bagging groceries at the grocery store, I'm stocking shelves. How much of those feelings come from this idea that we define ourselves and create an identity based on what we do for a living? And if that's what you want to do, if that feels good for you, then great. But do we have to do that? Is that necessary? Is it necessary for us to do that to ourselves? Is it necessary for us to look at other people that way? Maybe, maybe not.
The way you just said that made me think about like the ways that we choose to go against the grain, whether that's having a career that isn't typically considered to be a success, or choosing not to drink, or the ways that we spend our time that may be different, and to maybe think a little more deeply about those things as the things that actually create substance and texture in our lives.
You mentioned success a moment ago. Reminds me of something a friend of mine, Christine, said. I would love to get Christine on the podcast someday. Christine, if you're listening, you know who you are. Still love to get you on the podcast. But Christine was talking about something her dad said once. And I'm going to probably not say this exactly as well as she would, but her dad said something like, so life is a game. Decide how you want to keep score, and then keep score that way. When we talk about success, yeah, there are a lot of societal ideas. There are a lot of maybe ideas we get from our family, our friends, from other people. But if we really want to consider ourselves a success, that is probably going to require us to really define and confront what do we mean by success, and why is that type of success important for us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The one thing I would quibble with you with is, how do you want to win instead of win? How can you stay in the game?
Right. How do you stay in the game? Well, Amy, I want to be respectful of your time. And you may remember at the end of every episode, I like to ask people a question, and I'm going to ask you that question again.
Okay.
Could be the same answer. Maybe it'll be a different answer, but what is your dream right now?
Oh, wow. Okay. My dream right now is to be able to trail run again. I am almost a year out from a full hip replacement. And I am really, really hoping when I go for my year follow-up that my surgeon says, yes, you can absolutely hit the trails again. So that is my dream right now, to be sweating in the hot North Carolina summer out in the woods somewhere, picking my way over roots and rocks.
That sounds awesome. I hope that that dream is able to become a reality for you very, very soon.
Me too.
Amy, thanks again for being on the show again. It was always wonderful to talk to you, and thanks for everything that you shared.
Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Amy is an amazing coach, and she can help you build a better relationship with the person in your life who is probably going to have the biggest impact on how happy and successful you are. And that person is you. Amy enjoys helping people gain access to the strength and the support they need to start living a satisfying and full life. Her website is amyknottparrish.com. I'll include a link to that in the show notes so you can visit Amy's website and learn more about what she does. And if you're someone who's really interested in getting out of your comfort zone and finding new and exciting ways to live and work, or if you want to work on your time management skills and become more satisfied with how you use your time, visit my website, scottmillercoaching.com, or send me an email, scott@scottmillercoaching.com. I'd love to talk with you about that. If you're wondering what Bug is doing, she is taking a nap on the couch, and I think she's dreaming because I heard her barking in her sleep a couple minutes ago. That's all we got this time, folks. Take care.